What happens when a young, brilliant millionaire hires a humble nanny to care for his daughters, only to find their lives turned upside down by buried secrets, dangerous enemies, and a fight for redemption? In this heartwarming yet suspenseful story, love, trust, and courage will be put to the ultimate test. Will this family find the peace they deserve, or will their past unravel everything? Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a moment. Elena Cruz adjusted the strap of her modest handbag as she stood before the towering gates of the Hayes estate. The grandeur of the mansion loomed ahead, an intricate blend of modern design and southern charm. Its polished exterior gleamed under the Texan sun, yet there was a palpable sense of stillness, a quiet melancholy that seemed to seep through its pristine walls. She took a deep breath, clutching the resume she no longer needed, but which still felt like a lifeline. This was her new beginning, or so she hoped. As the gates opened with a soft hum, she walked up the long, tree-lined driveway. The sound of her sensible heels tapping against the cobblestone seemed to echo louder with each step. Her eyes swept over the estate, a perfectly manicured landscape that felt almost too perfect, like a postcard, beautiful but devoid of warmth. "Good morning, Miss Cruz." The voice startled her, breaking the spell of her observations. A sharply dressed woman in her late 40s greeted her at the door. "I'm Grace Fuller, Malcolm's sister-in-law. Welcome to the Hayes residence." The smile on Grace's face didn't reach her eyes. "Follow me, please." Elena nodded, stepping inside. The interior was stunning, gleaming hardwood floors, vaulted ceilings, and large windows that bathed everything in light. But it was the little things that caught her attention. Family portraits where smiles looked a little too forced, a faint echo of children's laughter that felt distant, and a distinct lack of the everyday clutter that usually made a house feel alive. As Grace led her through the house, she spoke with clipped precision. "The twins, Ava and Iris, are 6 years old, bright, inquisitive, but sensitive given the circumstances. Malcolm wants someone who can handle both their energy and their emotions. Are you prepared for that?" Elena met Grace's gaze, her own calm but resolute. "I've worked with children in challenging situations before. I'm confident I can provide what Ava and Iris need." Grace raised an eyebrow, her expression skeptical. "We'll see," she murmured, more to herself than to Elena. The tour ended in the living room where Malcolm Hayes stood near a floor-to-ceiling window. He was younger than Elena had imagined, his tailored suit doing little to hide the tension in his posture. His sharp features, framed by a neatly trimmed beard, bore the weight of sleepless nights and quiet grief. His eyes flickered toward Elena briefly before returning to the view outside. "Mr. Hayes," Grace prompted. He turned, his gaze meeting Elena's for the first time. There was a guarded quality to his expression, but also a glimmer of something else. Hope, perhaps? "Miss Cruz," he said simply, his voice low and measured. "Thank you for coming." Elena offered a polite smile. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Hayes. I'm looking forward to working with your family." He nodded, his lips pressing into a thin line. "Ava and Iris are upstairs. I'd like you to meet them." The girls were in their playroom, their laughter filling the air as they colored together at a small table. Ava, the more outgoing of the two, looked up first. Her dark curls framed a face full of curiosity. "Hi," she chirped. Iris glanced up more cautiously, clutching a crayon in her small hand. "Hello, Ava." "Hello, Iris," Elena said, her voice warm but soft. "I'm Elena. I'll be spending time with you from now on." Ava bounded over, her bright eyes scanning Elena's face. "Do you like to draw? I can show you how to make a unicorn." "I'd love that," Elena replied, crouching to their level. "I'm not very good at unicorns, though. You'll have to teach me." Iris lingered by the table, watching. After a moment, she held up a picture she had drawn, a simple house with 2 stick figures. Elena took it with a smile. "This is beautiful, Iris. Is this your house?" Iris nodded shyly. "It's for Mommy." The room fell silent. Elena felt the weight of Iris's words. She glanced at Malcolm, whose jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "It's lovely," Elena said gently, handing the drawing back. "I think your mommy would love it." The tension eased as Ava returned with a stack of crayons, pulling Elena into a cheerful lesson on rainbow making. For a brief moment, the room felt lighter. As Elena left the playroom, Malcolm stopped her. "Thank you," he said quietly. There was a sincerity in his voice that hadn't been there before. Elena met his gaze. "They're wonderful girls, Mr. Hayes. I'll do my best for them." Malcolm gave a faint nod before stepping back. As Elena walked to the guest house where she would stay, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a job. It was the start of something that would change all their lives. Elena's first day as the Hayes family nanny had ended with a faint sense of accomplishment and unease. Ava and Iris had warmed to her quicker than she'd expected, but the weight of Malcolm's guarded demeanor and Grace's skepticism lingered. It was clear this family wasn't just grieving, they were fractured, each member struggling to carry their own share of an invisible burden. The next morning, the sunlight streamed through the large windows of the kitchen as Elena prepared breakfast. The twins were unusually quiet, coloring at the table. Ava, usually brimming with energy, concentrated on her crayons with furrowed brows, while Iris absently stared out the window. Their silence felt heavy, and Elena decided to break it. "Are you two ready for school today?" she asked, her voice light, hoping to ease the tension. Ava shrugged without looking up. "I don't want to go." Elena set down the spatula and moved closer to the table. "Why not, sweetie?" Ava hesitated before mumbling, "It's too loud there. People ask too many questions." Iris nodded silently, her small fingers gripping her crayon. Elena knelt beside them, her heart aching for their obvious discomfort. "I understand," she said gently. "Sometimes things can feel overwhelming, but you're both so brave. And I'll be here when you get home, okay?" Ava looked at her for a long moment before nodding. Iris leaned into Elena's side, offering a quiet but powerful sign of trust. Later that morning, Grace arrived in the kitchen as the twins left with their driver for school. "I see you've already made yourself indispensable," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. Elena turned to face her, keeping her voice calm. "I'm here to support Ava and Iris, that's all." Grace folded her arms, her expression unyielding. "I hope you understand that this family has been through enough. Malcolm might think hiring you was a good idea, but don't mistake his kindness for trust." Elena felt the sting of Grace's words but held her ground. "I'm not here to make things harder, Miss Fuller. I care about those girls, and I want to help." Grace studied her for a moment before turning on her heel and leaving. The encounter left Elena shaken, but resolute. She had been through worse and had no intention of letting doubt creep in now. The day passed quietly until evening. Malcolm returned earlier than usual, his tie loosened, his shoulders sagging. He greeted the twins with a rare smile, listening as they recounted their day. Elena watched from the kitchen, noting the way his face softened around them, a stark contrast to the tense, distant man she'd met the day before. After the girls were in bed, Elena stayed in the kitchen cleaning up. She was startled when Malcolm appeared, leaning against the doorway. "You've been good with them," he said, his voice low. "Thank you," Elena replied, drying her hands. "They're amazing kids." "They are," Malcolm said, pausing as if choosing his next words carefully. "It's been difficult for them, for all of us." Elena nodded, sensing the unspoken pain behind his words. "Kids are resilient," she said softly, "but they need someone to help them feel safe." Malcolm's gaze lingered on her for a moment before he nodded. "Good night, Miss Cruz." "Good night, Mr. Hayes," she replied, watching as he retreated to his study. It was late when Elena finally made her way to her quarters. The house was quiet, but as she passed the hallway near the study, she heard Malcolm's voice. Pausing, she realized he was on the phone, his tone clipped and tense. "I told you, I don't want to involve them," he said sharply. A muffled response came from the other end, but Elena couldn't make out the words. "I'll handle it. Just don't contact me again." Elena quickly moved away, her heart pounding. Who was Malcolm speaking to, and why did he sound so desperate? The conversation nagged at her as she settled into bed, her mind swirling with questions. The next morning, Elena found the twins in the living room. Ava was drawing furiously, her crayons spread across the table, while Iris sat nearby, her small hands cradling a stuffed bear. The tension from the day before seemed to have returned. Elena approached them cautiously. "What are you drawing, Ava?" she asked. Ava didn't look up. "A castle," she muttered, "with big walls, so nothing bad can get in." Elena's chest tightened at the words. "That's a very strong castle," she said, kneeling beside her. "Did you know that even strong walls need doors, so the people inside can let in friends who make them happy?" Ava paused, glancing at her, and for a brief moment a small smile tugged at her lips. "Maybe I'll add a door." Elena smiled back, her heart swelling with a mix of hope and sadness. Whatever had fractured this family ran deep, and while she didn't know the full story, she was determined to help mend the pieces. That evening, Malcolm sat at the dining table with the twins while Elena cleared dishes. It was the first time she'd seen him join them for a meal. And though the conversation was sparse, the girls seemed lighter, more at ease. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As Elena stood by the kitchen sink, watching Malcolm tuck Ava and Iris into bed, she realized that she wasn't just here to work. She was here to heal, and maybe, just maybe, to be healed herself. The Hayes household began to settle into a tentative rhythm after Elena's arrival. The twins had started to open up more, their playful laughter returning in small bursts. Malcolm, though still reserved, made an effort to spend more time with his daughters. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet tension remained. Unspoken fears and hidden struggles casting long shadows over the family. One warm Saturday morning, Malcolm announced they would attend a charity event in downtown Austin, an annual fundraiser for local children's programs. The event was held at a sprawling community center, its lawn filled with booths, food trucks, and a stage for live performances. Ava and Iris were thrilled at the prospect of face painting and games, their excitement contagious. As they arrived, Elena noticed how Malcolm's demeanor shifted. The confident yet private man she had come to know now seemed restless, his eyes scanning the crowd as though searching for someone or avoiding them. She didn't have long to wonder before a well-dressed man approached, his smile wide and uninviting. "Malcolm Hayes," the man exclaimed, extending a hand. "It's been years." "Michael," Malcolm replied, his voice clipped. He hesitated before shaking the man's hand, his expression unreadable. The exchange felt charged, but Elena stayed close to the twins, sensing that whatever tension hung between the two men wasn't meant for her ears. Ava tugged at her sleeve, pointing toward the games. "Can we go over there, Elena?" "Of course, sweetheart," Elena said, guiding the girls toward a ring toss booth. As the twins giggled and played, she kept one eye on Malcolm, who was now in deep conversation with Michael. Malcolm's posture was stiff, his hand repeatedly clenching into a fist at his side. Whatever was being discussed, it wasn't friendly. When the conversation ended, Malcolm joined Elena and the girls. His face was pale, his jaw tight. He crouched beside Ava, fixing her hat. "Having fun?" he asked, his tone forced. "Yes, I'm going to win a big stuffed animal," Ava declared, oblivious to her father's unease. Iris nodded, clutching Elena's hand. "That's great," Malcolm said, standing and offering Elena a brief glance. "I'll be back in a few minutes." Elena watched him walk toward the community center building, his shoulders tense. She debated whether to follow, but the twins needed her attention. For now, she let it go, though the encounter with Michael lingered in her mind. The rest of the event passed uneventfully, but as the evening settled in and the twins were tucked into bed, Elena couldn't stop thinking about Malcolm's behavior. Something about Michael's presence had rattled him, and the guarded man she was growing accustomed to seemed more vulnerable than ever. Later that night, as she prepared for bed, she heard the faint hum of voices near the study. Quietly she approached, finding Malcolm on another phone call. His voice was low but tense. "I told you to handle it. I can't afford for this to blow up now," he said. There was a long pause as the person on the other end responded. "Just keep him away from my family. That's all I care about." The words hung heavy in the air. Elena stepped back, her heart pounding. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but it was becoming increasingly clear that whatever haunted Malcolm wasn't just grief. It was something far more complicated. The next day, Malcolm seemed calmer, but Elena noticed his distraction. While Ava and Iris played in the backyard, Malcolm sat on the patio staring at his phone. Gathering her courage, Elena approached. "Mr. Hayes," she began, keeping her tone casual. Is everything all right? You seemed tense yesterday. Malcolm glanced up, his face briefly softening before his guard returned. It's nothing to worry about, he said. Elena hesitated, unsure whether to push further. Sometimes it helps to talk, she offered gently. He let out a faint chuckle, though it lacked humor. Talking doesn't fix things, Miss Cruz. Actions do. Before she could respond, Ava ran up, her face flushed with excitement. Daddy, come play with us. Malcolm stood, his expression softening as he looked at his daughter. Of course, sweetheart. As he walked away, Elena remained on the patio, her thoughts swirling. Malcolm's walls were high, and whatever he was hiding, he was determined to keep it locked away. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever troubled him was tied to the family's safety, and possibly to the man from the fundraiser. That evening, as Elena reflected on the day, memories of her own childhood crept in. The uncertainty, the feeling of living on edge, wondering if someone would come to take away the fragile semblance of peace. She recognized that same unease in Malcolm, though he carried it differently. For now, she resolved to stay vigilant, for the twins, and for the family she was slowly beginning to feel a part of. The days following the fundraiser carried an unshakable tension. Malcolm's encounter with Michael and the cryptic phone call in the study lingered in Elena's mind like a shadow that refused to dissipate. She couldn't ignore the unease she felt, but with Malcolm unwilling to share, her priority became clear: Ava and Iris. Whatever storm brewed around Malcolm, the twins needed her now more than ever. It was a stormy night when the unease in the house finally bubbled over. Thunder rumbled in the distance as rain streaked the windows, casting trembling shadows on the walls. Elena was in the twins' room, helping Ava pick out a book for bedtime. Iris sat curled on her bed, clutching her favorite stuffed bear. The weather seemed to heighten their anxiety, their usual playful banter replaced by quiet murmurs. Do you think lightning can come inside the house? Ava asked, her eyes wide. No, sweetheart, Elena said, crouching to meet her gaze. This house is safe, and I'm right here with you. Like a shield? Iris whispered, her voice barely audible. Elena smiled softly. Exactly like a shield. Nothing will get past me. Her words were meant to comfort, but as she tucked the girls in, they resonated deeper within her. She meant them, every word. Protecting these girls had become more than a job. It was a promise she intended to keep, no matter the cost. After the twins fell asleep, Elena returned to her quarters, but rest didn't come. The storm outside mirrored her restless thoughts. She couldn't shake the memory of Malcolm's words. Just keep him away from my family. Who was he protecting them from? And why couldn't he trust her enough to confide in her? A sudden crash downstairs jolted her from her thoughts. Her heart leaped into her throat as she grabbed her phone, quickly dialing the estate's security number. There was no answer. The crash came again, this time louder. Someone was in the house. Her instincts kicked in. Without hesitation, she rushed to the twins' room. Ava and Iris were already awake, their eyes wide with fear. Stay quiet, Elena whispered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. We're going to hide, just like we practiced. She guided them into the crawl space in the back of their closet, pulling the small door closed behind them. The space was tight and dark, but the girls clung to her, their trust giving her strength. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, heavy and deliberate. Whoever was in the house wasn't trying to be quiet. Elena's breath caught as she heard the unmistakable creak of the twins' bedroom door. She held them closer, whispering softly, "Stay still, stay quiet. I've got you." The intruder didn't linger. The footsteps receded, heading toward Malcolm's study. Elena exhaled shakily, her mind racing. Her phone vibrated silently in her pocket. It was Malcolm. "Elena, are you and the girls safe?" His voice was sharp, urgent. "We're hiding," she whispered. "There's someone in the house." "I'm on my way. Stay where you are," he said, his tone brooking no argument. The minutes that followed felt like hours. The sounds of drawers opening and papers rustling echoed faintly through the walls. Whoever was there wasn't just after valuables. They were searching for something specific. Finally, the front door slammed open, followed by the sound of Malcolm's voice. You shouldn't have come here, he shouted, his voice laced with fury. There was a scuffle, then silence. Elena stayed frozen, clutching the girls, until Malcolm's voice called out again, this time softer. Elena, it's safe now. You can come out. She emerged cautiously, her arms still wrapped protectively around Ava and Iris. The sight in the living room made her heart pound. Malcolm stood over a man on the floor, his breathing ragged. The man was unconscious but alive, his face partially obscured by a hood. Elena, Malcolm said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry. She wanted to demand answers, to scream at him for keeping secrets, but the sight of Ava and Iris clinging to her reminded her of her purpose. We need to call the police, she said firmly. Detective Carla Monroe arrived within the hour. As she assessed the scene, her sharp eyes flicked between Malcolm and the unconscious intruder. Do you know him? She asked. Malcolm hesitated before nodding. His name is Jack Morris. He used to work for me. Used to, Carla pressed. It's complicated, Malcolm replied, his tone heavy with guilt. Carla nodded, her expression unreadable. We'll need to take your statement. And his, she added, gesturing to Jack as officers carried him out. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving Elena with a mix of exhaustion and frustration. As she helped the twins back into bed, their small hands clinging to hers, she felt the weight of the night settle on her shoulders. When Malcolm approached her later, his eyes weary and filled with regret, she cut him off. I don't need your apologies, Mr. Hayes, she said, her voice firm but quiet. I need the truth, because whatever you're hiding, it's not just affecting you, it's affecting all of us. Malcolm stared at her for a long moment before nodding. Tomorrow, he said finally. I'll tell you everything. Elena didn't know if she believed him, but for now she could only focus on the promise she'd made to Ava and Iris. No matter what secrets lay ahead, she would stand by them. Elena barely slept after the terrifying break-in. Every creak of the house set her on edge, and though Malcolm had promised answers, the weight of his secrets hung heavy in the air. Morning came too soon, and as the first rays of sunlight streamed through her window, she resolved to push aside her exhaustion for the twins' sake. When she entered the kitchen, Ava and Iris were already seated at the table, their small faces pale and drawn. They didn't touch the pancakes Malcolm had made, a rare occurrence that signaled just how shaken they were. Morning, sweethearts, Elena said, forcing a warm smile as she sat beside them. How are you feeling? Ava toyed with her fork, not meeting Elena's gaze. Is the bad man gone? She asked quietly. Elena's heart clenched. She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Ava's face. Yes, he's gone, and he won't come back. You're safe now. Iris, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. But what if there are more bad people? What if they come for Daddy? Elena glanced at Malcolm, who stood by the stove, his shoulders visibly tense. Your daddy won't let anything happen to you, she assured them. And neither will I. The twins nodded, their small hands reaching for hers. The gesture, so simple yet so full of trust, strengthened her resolve. She had promised to protect them, and she wouldn't back down now. Later that morning, Malcolm called Elena into his study. The door, usually locked, was slightly ajar. Inside, the room was neat but impersonal, dominated by a large oak desk and walls lined with bookshelves. Malcolm stood by the window, his hands in his pockets. Thank you for coming, he began, his voice low. I owe you an explanation. Elena crossed her arms, her expression calm but expectant. Yes, you do, he sighed, turning to face her. The man from last night, Jack Morris, used to work for my company. He was one of my first employees when I started Hayes Tech. Elena listened silently, her heart pounding as he continued. Jack was brilliant, Malcolm said, but he made some bad choices. A few years ago, he embezzled company funds to cover his personal debts. When we found out, we had no choice but to fire him and press charges. Elena frowned. But why would he come after you now? This doesn't seem like just a grudge. It's not, Malcolm admitted, his tone heavy with regret. Jack's wife passed away last year. He's been struggling to raise their son alone, and his financial situation has only gotten worse. He thought there was money here, something that could save him. Elena's breath caught. Was he right? Was there something here he was after? Malcolm hesitated before shaking his head. No, at least not in the way he believed. Jack convinced himself there was a hidden fortune in the house, but it was a delusion. There's nothing. Elena wanted to believe him, but something in his voice made her doubt. And the phone calls, the man from the fundraiser, are they connected to this? Malcolm's jaw tightened. Michael is another complication. Let's just say he has his own agenda, and I made mistakes trusting him. Before Elena could press further, there was a knock at the door. Detective Carla Monroe stepped inside, her sharp eyes assessing the room. Am I interrupting? No, Malcolm said, his tone clipped. What do you need? Carla held up a folder. I've got the initial report on Jack Morris. He's talking, and some of what he's saying might interest you. Malcolm motioned for her to sit, but Carla remained standing. Jack claims he wasn't acting alone, she said bluntly. He says someone encouraged him to come here, someone who knew your schedule, your habits. Elena felt the air leave the room. Are you saying this was planned? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. That's exactly what I'm saying, Carla replied. And until we know who else is involved, I suggest tightening your security. Whoever this is, they're not done. The gravity of her words settled over them. Elena clenched her fists, anger rising alongside fear. Why would someone do this? She asked. Carla's gaze softened as she looked at Elena. Sometimes desperation makes people do things they wouldn't normally consider, but that doesn't excuse putting others in danger. Malcolm exhaled heavily. What do you recommend? Carla placed a card on the desk. Hire a professional security firm. And Malcolm, be honest with the people in this house. Secrets will only make things worse. Elena met Malcolm's gaze, her expression resolute. She's right. Whatever this is, we need to face it together. For the rest of the day, the estate buzzed with activity. New locks were installed, security cameras mounted, and guards patrolled the grounds. The twins watched from the window, their curiosity mingled with unease. Elena knelt beside them. It's okay to feel scared, she said gently. But remember, being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you keep going even when you are. Ava looked at her thoughtfully. Are you scared, Elena? Elena hesitated before nodding. A little, but I know we'll get through this, together. As the day wound down, Malcolm approached Elena in the kitchen. Thank you, he said quietly, for staying, for everything. I'm here for the girls, she replied, her tone firm but not unkind. And for now, that includes you. Just don't shut me out again. Malcolm's expression softened, and for the first time Elena saw a glimmer of vulnerability in his eyes. I'll try. That night, as Elena checked on the twins one last time, she found them sleeping peacefully, their hands clutching each other's. She sat by their bedside, her resolve stronger than ever. Whatever dangers lay ahead, she wouldn't let them face it alone. The heightened security around the Hayes estate brought a temporary sense of relief. Guards patrolled the perimeter, cameras captured every angle, and the sound of reinforced locks clicking into place became a nightly ritual. But for Elena, the unease lingered. Jack Morris wasn't working alone, and Malcolm's evasiveness made it clear that the danger wasn't gone. It was simply lurking in the shadows. Days later, while the twins played outside with a new puppy Malcolm had surprised them with, Elena couldn't help but notice how quickly their laughter returned when they felt safe. Their resilience amazed her, but it also reminded her of her own childhood, brief pockets of joy overshadowed by instability. She vowed silently to protect their happiness, no matter what. In the study that afternoon, Malcolm was poring over financial documents when Elena entered with a tray of coffee. He looked up, his brow furrowed, but softening slightly at the sight of her. Busy? She asked, setting the tray down. Always, he replied, rubbing his temples, but never productive. Elena hesitated, then decided to speak. I think you're trying to handle too much alone, Malcolm. Whatever's going on, you don't have to face it by yourself. He leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. It's not that simple. Then make it simple, she pressed. You hired me to take care of Ava and Iris, but this affects all of us. I need to know what we're up against. Malcolm sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. There's more to this than I've told you, he admitted. But it's not something I'm proud of. Before he could elaborate, a knock at the door interrupted them. Detective Carla Monroe stepped in, her presence commanding as always. I hope I'm not intruding, she said, her sharp eyes scanning the room. Not at all, Malcolm replied, gesturing for her to sit. Carla wasted no time. We've made progress on Jack Morris. He's cooperative, but his story keeps changing. What's consistent is that he was given specific details about your schedule and the layout of your house. Malcolm tensed. Do you know who gave him the information? Carla shook her head. Not yet, but he mentioned someone by the name of Michael during questioning. The name sent a visible ripple of tension through Malcolm. Elena noticed how his jaw tightened, his fingers gripping the edge of the desk. Michael Whitaker, Carla clarified, her tone pointed. Ring a bell? He's an old business acquaintance, Malcolm admitted reluctantly. But I haven't spoken to him in years. Jack says otherwise, Carla replied. He claims Michael approached him recently, offering him a deal that involved targeting you. Elena felt the air leave the room. Why would he do that? She asked, unable to hide her shock. Carla leaned forward. That's what we're trying to figure out. But Malcolm, if you're holding back anything, now's the time to come clean. The safety of your family depends on it. Malcolm's silence was deafening. After a long pause, he finally spoke. Michael and I worked together when I started Hayes Tech. We built the company from the ground up, but as we grew, we didn't see eye to eye. He wanted quick profits. I wanted sustainable growth. When I found out he'd been making deals behind my back, I bought him out. And he didn't take it well, Carla guessed. No, Malcolm admitted. He tried to sue, but it didn't hold up in court. I thought that was the end of it. Clearly it wasn't, Carla said, her tone sharp. Michael's harboring a grudge, and now he's dragging others into it. Elena couldn't stay silent any longer. So Jack was just a pawn? She asked, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. And Michael is still out there planning who knows what? Carla nodded grimly. That's the reality we're dealing with, and until we find Michael, the threat remains. The meeting ended with Carla promising to keep them updated, but the tension in the house only deepened. As Malcolm escorted her out, Elena lingered in the study, her eyes drawn to the shelves of neatly arranged books and framed photographs. One frame, slightly askew, caught her attention. Behind it, she noticed a small key taped to the wall. Curiosity piqued, she reached for it. The key was old, its surface tarnished with age. Her heart raced as she turned it over in her hand. What was it for? When Malcolm returned, she slipped the key into her pocket, her mind racing with possibilities. Whatever secrets lay hidden in this house, Elena was determined to uncover them. Not for herself, but for Ava and Iris. They deserved peace, and if Malcolm wouldn't give her the answers she needed, she would find them herself. That night, as the house settled into uneasy silence, Elena sat by her window, the key heavy in her hand. She stared out into the darkness, the storm clouds gathering once again. This wasn't just about a single break-in or a vengeful former colleague. It was a web of lies, and she was caught in the middle of it. The old key weighed heavily in Elena's pocket, its presence a quiet reminder of the secrets that shrouded the Hayes estate. She hadn't yet decided when or how she would use it, but the growing tension in the house told her that waiting too long could be dangerous. Malcolm's revelations about Michael Whitaker and Jack Morris had opened the door to more questions than answers, and the twins' innocent trust only deepened her resolve. Whatever Malcolm was hiding, it was no longer just his burden. The following morning brought no reprieve. A gray sky loomed over the estate, mirroring the somber mood inside. Malcolm sat at the dining table, his focus on a stack of papers while Ava and Iris quietly colored at the far end. The usual chatter was absent, replaced by a silence that felt almost oppressive. Elena watched the scene unfold from the kitchen, her heart aching for the girls. "Daddy," Ava piped up suddenly, her voice hesitant. "Are we going to be okay?" Malcolm looked up, startled. For a moment, his mask of control slipped, and the exhaustion in his eyes was unmistakable. "Of course we are," he said, his tone too forced to be reassuring. "Why would you ask that?" Ava hesitated, glancing at her sister before responding. Because bad people keep coming, and you're always worried. Elena stepped in before the conversation could spiral. Your dad is doing everything he can to keep you safe, she said, crouching to their level. And so am I. You don't have to worry about anything, okay? The twins nodded, but the uncertainty in their expressions lingered. As they returned to their drawings, Elena caught Malcolm's gaze. There was gratitude there, but also something else, guilt. That afternoon, as the twins napped, Elena decided to confront Malcolm. She found him in his study, the papers from breakfast spread out across his desk. He didn't look up as she entered, but his posture stiffened. We need to talk, she said, closing the door behind her. Malcolm sighed, setting down his pen. I figured this was coming. Good, Elena replied, crossing her arms, because I'm done being left in the dark. Jack Michael, whatever's going on, it's putting Ava and Iris in danger. They deserve better than that. Malcolm leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. You think I don't know that? Every decision I've made, every risk I've taken has been for them. Then let me help you, Elena insisted. But I can't do that if you keep shutting me out. For a moment, it seemed like Malcolm might push her away again. But then he exhaled deeply, running a hand through his hair. There's something you need to see, he said. He stood and walked to the bookshelf, pulling a thin volume that triggered a hidden latch. A panel in the wall slid open, revealing a small safe. Elena watched in silence as he unlocked it, retrieving a folder stuffed with documents. These are records from the early days of Hayes Tech, he explained. Contracts, financial statements, and proof of Michael's illegal dealings. Elena frowned, taking the folder. Why do you still have this? Because it's leverage, Malcolm admitted. Michael doesn't just hold grudges, he destroys people. I thought having this would protect me, but it's only made things worse. Before Elena could respond, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. They both froze, the sound of hurried footsteps following. Malcolm moved toward the door, but Elena grabbed his arm. Wait, she whispered. What if it's them? Malcolm hesitated before nodding. Together, they crept into the hallway. The source of the commotion became clear. The twins' room. Elena's heart raced as she pushed the door open, relief flooding her when she saw Ava and Iris unharmed. But the room was in disarray, their window open and curtains billowing in the wind. Ava clung to Iris, her voice trembling. Someone was here. Elena pulled them close, her mind racing. Did they hurt you? Did you see who it was? Ava shook her head. They were wearing a mask. They just looked around and left. Malcolm called for security, his voice sharp with urgency. Guards swept the house, but the intruder had already vanished. As Elena comforted the twins, Malcolm stood by the window, his fists clenched. This ends now, he said, his voice low but fierce. That night, Malcolm gathered the household staff and security team in the living room. From this point on, no one gets in or out without my approval, he declared. And Elena, I need you to stay close to the girls, always. Elena nodded, though her mind was already working. Whoever was behind these attacks wasn't just after Malcolm. They wanted to unravel everything he'd built. And if she was going to protect Ava and Iris, she needed to understand why. As the house settled into an uneasy silence, Elena retrieved the key from her pocket. She couldn't ignore its significance any longer. Whatever secrets it unlocked, they might be the only way to untangle the web of lies surrounding the Hayes family. The unease in the Hayes estate had reached a boiling point. With another intruder slipping past security, Malcolm's declaration of stricter measures provided little solace. Elena's thoughts returned to the key in her pocket, its significance gnawing at her. She had stayed silent the previous night, not wanting to stir more tension, but her gut told her it was time to act. Morning came with a fragile sense of calm. Malcolm left early for a meeting with Detective Carla Monroe, leaving Elena to care for Ava and Iris. The girls seemed subdued, their usual playful energy replaced by quiet conversations and cautious glances at the windows. Elena did her best to comfort them, but her own fears were difficult to mask. By midday, the girls had settled in their playroom. Elena stood outside the door for a moment, ensuring they were content before slipping away. She retrieved the key from her pocket, its tarnished surface cold against her fingers. Malcolm had mentioned leverage against Michael, but she knew there was more he wasn't saying. If this key unlocked another layer of the truth, she had to find it. Elena's search brought her to Malcolm's study, the one room in the house that seemed to breathe with secrets. She scanned the bookshelves, the desk drawers, and even the ornate filing cabinet, but nothing stood out as a match for the key. Frustrated, she leaned against the desk, her eyes falling on the fireplace. Above it, a small locked drawer was nestled within the mantle's decorative woodwork. Her pulse quickened. The key slid into the lock smoothly. With a soft click, the drawer opened to reveal a single envelope. Inside were a stack of photographs and a handwritten letter. As Elena sifted through the contents, a wave of disbelief washed over her. The photos depicted Malcolm and Michael standing side by side, smiling. In one image, Michael held a document that looked suspiciously like a contract. The letter, however, was what made Elena's heart sink. "Malcolm," it began, "you always thought you were better than me, but you don't understand the world we live in. Every deal we made, every corner we cut, it's all coming back to haunt you. You can't outrun your past. Consider this a warning." The words were chilling, the implication clear. Malcolm's success had come at a cost, and now someone was making him pay. Elena was so absorbed in the letter that she didn't hear the study door open. She jumped as a voice broke the silence. "Find what you were looking for?" Malcolm's tone was sharp, his eyes locked on the envelope in her hand. Elena's throat tightened. I wasn't trying to pry. But you've been keeping secrets, Malcolm, and it's putting everyone in danger. I needed to understand." Malcolm stepped forward, his jaw clenched. For a moment it seemed like he might lash out, but then his shoulders sagged. "You're right," he admitted. "I've been keeping things from you, but it wasn't to hurt you, or the girls." "Then why?" Elena demanded, holding up the letter. "Why hide this? Why let Michael hold this over you?" Malcolm sank into the chair behind his desk, his head in his hands. "Because I thought I could fix it on my own. I thought if I ignored him long enough, he'd go away." "But he hasn't," Elena said firmly. "And now he's dragging innocent people into this. Ava and Iris deserve better than that." The mention of his daughters seemed to cut through Malcolm's defenses. He looked up, his expression filled with guilt. "You're right," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to stop running from this." Before they could continue, Malcolm's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face darkening. "It's Carla," he said, answering the call. "What is it?" Elena watched as his expression shifted from concern to alarm. "I'll be there," he said curtly, hanging up. "Jack Morris has more to say," he told her. "I need to go." "I'm coming with you," Elena said, her tone leaving no room for argument. At the police station, Detective Monroe greeted them with a solemn expression. "Jack's been cooperative, but what he just told us changes everything," she said. "He claims Michael isn't just after revenge. He's using you, Malcolm, as bait." "Bait?" Malcolm asked, his voice incredulous. "For what?" Elena added, her stomach churning. "Money," Carla replied. "Jack says Michael's in deep with some dangerous people. He's trying to force your hand, get you to pay up or risk losing everything." The revelation hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Malcolm's silence spoke volumes, but Elena refused to let him retreat into himself again. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. Carla leaned forward. "We play along. Let him think he's winning. But Malcolm, you need to trust us, and Elena, to see this through. No more secrets." Malcolm nodded, the weight of his decision evident in his expression. As they left the station, Elena glanced at him. "You don't have to do this alone," she said softly. He looked at her, his gaze filled with a mix of gratitude and vulnerability. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up on me." Elena didn't respond, but as they drove back to the estate, she knew the fight was far from over. Michael's web of deceit was tighter than she'd imagined, and unraveling it would take everything they had, and more. Michael Whitaker's shadow hung heavily over the Hayes estate. With Detective Carla Monroe's plan to bait him into revealing his endgame, Malcolm's resolve was tested like never before. The carefully curated life he'd built for his daughters now felt fragile. every decision balancing on the knife's edge of risk and consequence. But for Elena, the mission was clear. Protect Ava and Iris, no matter what. 2 days after the meeting with Carla, the plan was set in motion. Malcolm would arrange a meeting with Michael, ostensibly to negotiate a truce. Carla's team would be watching, ready to intervene the moment things turned dangerous. But as Malcolm prepared to face the man who had betrayed him, doubts gnawed at the edges of his confidence. "Are you sure about this?" Elena asked that evening as they stood in the study. The twins were asleep, their soft breathing a constant reminder of what was at stake. "No," Malcolm admitted, his voice low. "But if I don't stop him now, it'll never end." Elena placed a hand on his arm, her steady gaze grounding him. "Then we do it together. You're not alone in this." Malcolm nodded, the faintest trace of a smile breaking through his weariness. "Thank you, Elena, for everything." The meeting was set for a secluded coffee shop on the outskirts of Austin. Michael, unaware of the surveillance team, arrived looking smug, his confidence as sharp as his tailored suit. Malcolm was already seated, his posture tense but outwardly composed. "You're finally seeing reason," Michael said, sliding into the chair across from him. "Took you long enough." "This isn't about reason," Malcolm replied evenly. "It's about ending this. What do you want, Michael?" Michael smirked, leaning back. "It's simple, really. A few million wired to a secure account. Consider it repayment for everything you stole from me." "I didn't steal from you," Malcolm countered. "You gambled and lost. That's on you." Michael's eyes darkened, his facade of charm cracking. "Careful, Malcolm. I'd hate for something unfortunate to happen to your family." The veiled threat sent a chill through Malcolm, but he held his ground. "You don't scare me," he said. "You never did." As Michael opened his mouth to respond, a sudden flurry of movement interrupted them. Carla's team swarmed the cafe, their guns drawn and commands sharp. Michael's smirk vanished as officers cuffed his hands behind his back. "This is entrapment," he shouted, struggling against his restraints. "You'll regret this, Hayes." Malcolm stood, his composure intact despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "No, Michael, you're the one who'll regret it." Back at the estate, the tension finally broke. Malcolm returned to find Elena in the living room with the twins, their laughter a balm to his frayed nerves. Ava and Iris rushed to him, their small arms wrapping around his legs. "Daddy, you're home!" Ava exclaimed, her voice bright. "Of course I am," he said, crouching to hug them. "I'll always come back to you." As the girls ran off to play, Elena approached, her expression both relieved and curious. "Is it over?" "For now," Malcolm replied. "Michael's in custody. Carla says the evidence against him is airtight." Elena nodded, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. "That's good. The girls can finally feel safe again." "So can I," Malcolm admitted, his voice softer. "Thanks to you." Their eyes met, a quiet understanding passing between them. Elena had become more than a nanny. She was part of the family, a source of strength he hadn't known he needed. In the weeks that followed, life at the Hayes estate began to heal. Carla's team uncovered the full extent of Michael's crimes, tying him to a network of illegal dealings that stretched far beyond his grudge against Malcolm. Jack Morris, though complicit, received a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation, and his young son was placed with a caring foster family, a decision that struck a chord with Elena. One afternoon, as Elena sat with Ava and Iris in the backyard, Malcolm joined them. The sun was warm, and the air was filled with the sound of the twins' laughter. "Thank you," he said quietly, taking a seat beside her. "For what?" Elena asked, though she already knew. "For everything," Malcolm replied. "For the girls, for me. I don't know how we would have gotten through this without you." Elena smiled, her heart full. "You didn't need saving, Malcolm. You just needed someone to remind you how strong you already are." He reached for her hand, his touch light but meaningful. "Then consider yourself part of this family if you want to be." Tears pricked Elena's eyes, but she didn't look away. "I'd like that. Very much." As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, the Hayes family, now whole in a way they hadn't been before, sat together, their future bright and unclouded by fear. The weeks following Michael's arrest brought a sense of calm to the Hayes estate that felt almost foreign. For the first time in months, Malcolm, Ava, and Iris could breathe freely without the constant shadow of danger looming over them. The house, once heavy with tension, was filled with laughter again, and Elena, who had once been an outsider looking in, now felt like an inseparable part of their world. One sunny morning, the family gathered in the backyard for breakfast. The twins chattered excitedly about their plans for the day, their faces glowing with the carefree joy of children who finally felt safe. Elena poured herself a cup of coffee, marveling at how far they'd come. "Miss Elena, can we go to the park today?" Ava asked, her curls bouncing as she climbed onto a chair. "Please?" Iris added, her wide eyes brimming with hope. Elena smiled. "We'll see what your dad thinks." Malcolm looked up from his newspaper, a rare grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I think a trip to the park sounds like a great idea, but only if Miss Elena promises to come too." The girls squealed in delight, and Elena laughed, her heart warm. "I suppose I can make time," she teased. As the morning unfolded, Malcolm took Elena aside. They stood under the shade of a large oak tree, the sounds of the twins playing in the distance. "I've been thinking about what you said," Malcolm began, his tone serious but kind, "about how I don't have to do this alone." Elena tilted her head, waiting for him to continue. "You've been more than just a nanny to us," he said. "You've been a friend, a protector, and most importantly, a part of this family. I want to make that official." Elena's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I want you to stay," Malcolm said, his voice steady. "Not just as an employee, but as someone the girls and I can rely on, permanently." For a moment, Elena couldn't speak. The weight of his words, the sincerity in his eyes left her overwhelmed. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Malcolm urged. "The girls adore you, and so do I." Tears pricked Elena's eyes, but she nodded. "Yes, of course, yes." The rest of the day passed in a blur of happiness. The trip to the park was filled with laughter and games, the girls running freely while Malcolm and Elena watched from a bench. The city seemed brighter, the world more hopeful. That evening, as the twins prepared for bed, Iris tugged at Elena's sleeve. "Will you stay forever?" she asked softly. Elena knelt to meet her gaze. "Forever is a long time," she said gently, "but I promise to stay as long as you need me." Iris hugged her tightly, and Ava joined in, their small arms wrapping around her in a gesture that spoke volumes. In that moment, Elena realized that she wasn't just part of their lives. She was home. The next morning, Malcolm surprised them all with another announcement. "I've decided to start a foundation," he said over breakfast, "for families and children who've been through what we have." Elena looked at him, her pride evident. "That's a wonderful idea." "I couldn't have done it without you," Malcolm said. "Your strength inspired me." Together, they began planning the foundation, with Elena taking an active role in shaping its mission. The work gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years, a way to channel her past into something meaningful. As the days turned into weeks, the Hayes family settled into their new normal. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer defined them. Instead, they served as reminders of what they had overcome and the strength they had found in each other. One evening, as the sun set over the estate, Malcolm and Elena stood on the back porch, watching the girls chase fireflies. The golden light cast a warm glow over everything, and for the first time, Malcolm felt truly at peace. "Do you think they'll remember this?" he asked quietly. Elena smiled, her gaze on the twins. "Maybe, but even if they don't, they'll remember how it felt. Safe, loved, happy." Malcolm nodded, his heart full. "Thank you, Elena, for helping us find our way back to that." She turned to him, her eyes shining. "You didn't need my help, Malcolm. You just needed to remember you weren't alone." As the stars began to dot the sky, they stood there together, a family united by love, resilience, and the promise of a brighter future. The Hayes family had come a long way from the dark days of uncertainty and fear. Malcolm's decision to start a foundation for struggling families had not only given him a renewed sense of purpose, but had also drawn the family closer together. The work required their collective effort, and for the first time, They truly felt like a team, a family united by love, determination, and a shared goal of helping others. The foundation's launch event was scheduled for a crisp autumn evening at the Hayes estate. The preparations were meticulous, with Malcolm overseeing logistics, Elena coordinating the children's activities, and the twins enthusiastically helping wherever they could. Their laughter echoed through the halls as they tried to tie ribbons on donation boxes, their small hands often tangling the fabric. "Look, Elena," Ava exclaimed, holding up a lopsided bow. "I did it," Elena chuckled, kneeling beside her. "It's perfect, Ava. You're a natural." Iris tugged at Elena's sleeve. "Can we make more? Lots and lots of them." "As many as you want," Elena replied, her heart swelling with affection. Malcolm walked in, a rare smile on his face as he watched the scene unfold. "I think we might have the best ribbon-tying team in all of Texas," he said. The girls beamed at the praise, running off to find more ribbons. Malcolm turned to Elena, his smile softening. "You've been amazing with them. I don't think I've said that enough." Elena shook her head. "You don't need to. They're incredible kids. They make it easy." His gaze lingered on her for a moment before he spoke again. "And what about you? How are you handling all this?" "I'm good," she said honestly. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Malcolm nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. They were building something meaningful, not just for the community, but for themselves. As evening fell, the estate transformed into a lively hub of activity. Guests arrived, their conversations and laughter filling the air. The twins, dressed in matching outfits, proudly showed off their ribbon work to anyone who would listen. Elena watched them from a distance, her heart full. Detective Carla Monroe was among the guests, her sharp eyes scanning the crowd with a mixture of amusement and pride. She approached Malcolm, a rare smile on her face. "You've outdone yourself," she said. "This is exactly what the community needed." "Thanks, Carla," Malcolm replied. "But I couldn't have done it without a lot of help." Carla's gaze shifted to Elena, who was helping the twins set up a game booth. "She's something special," Carla said. "She is," Malcolm agreed, his tone thoughtful. "We're lucky to have her." As the event continued, Malcolm took the stage to address the crowd. His speech was heartfelt, reflecting on the challenges his family had faced and the lessons they'd learned along the way. He spoke about resilience, the importance of community, and the power of second chances. "For a long time, I thought I had to do everything alone," he admitted. "But what I've learned is that strength doesn't come from isolation. It comes from the people who stand beside you no matter what." The crowd erupted into applause, and Malcolm stepped down, joining his family. The twins ran to him, their faces glowing with pride. "Daddy, you were so good!" Ava exclaimed, throwing her arms around his legs. "You didn't forget any words," Iris added, her voice full of admiration. Malcolm laughed, crouching to hug them. "Thanks, girls. That means a lot." Later that night, as the event wound down and guests began to leave, Elena found herself on the back porch, gazing at the stars. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves. Malcolm joined her, his presence quiet but comforting. "It's been a long day," he said, leaning against the railing. "A good one, though," Elena replied. "You should be proud." "I am," he said, his voice thoughtful. "But it's not just about tonight. It's about what comes next, for the foundation, for the girls, for us." Elena turned to him, her expression curious. "What do you mean?" "I mean this," he said, gesturing to the house, the yard, the world they'd built together. "This family. You're a part of it, Elena, and I want to make sure you always feel that way." She smiled, her chest tightening with emotion. "I already do, but thank you for saying it." As the night deepened, Malcolm and Elena stood together, watching the lights of the estate fade one by one. Inside, the twins slept peacefully, their world finally secure. And outside, beneath a blanket of stars, Malcolm and Elena knew they had found something rare and precious, a family united, stronger than ever. The Hayes estate was quiet again, the echoes of the foundation's successful launch still lingering in the air. For the first time in months, Malcolm, Elena, Ava, and Iris had a day to themselves. a rare, unhurried moment to enjoy the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. The morning began with the smell of fresh coffee and pancakes, Malcolm's newfound specialty. Ava and Iris sat at the kitchen counter, giggling as they attempted to flip their own pancakes, much to Malcolm's amusement. "Careful, Ava," Malcolm said, guiding her hand on the spatula. "You don't want to send it flying." "Like last time?" Iris teased, earning a laugh from her sister. Elena entered the kitchen, her heart swelling at the sight of them. It was a far cry from the guarded, somber household she had stepped into months ago. Now there was warmth, laughter, and most importantly, hope. "Good morning," she said, grabbing a mug and pouring herself coffee. "Morning," the twins chimed in unison, their smiles infectious. Malcolm turned, handing her a plate of pancakes. "I saved the best ones for you." Elena smirked. "If these are the best, I'm worried about what the twins got." Ava and Iris erupted into laughter and Malcolm feigned offense. "You wound me, Elena." After breakfast, the family decided to spend the day outdoors. The backyard, once a symbol of isolation, had transformed into a sanctuary. A new swing set, a sandbox, and a flower garden tended lovingly by Elena and the girls filled the space with life and color. "Push me higher, Elena," Ava called from the swing, her curls bouncing as she laughed. Elena obliged, her own laughter mingling with the twins. Iris busied herself in the sandbox, building a castle fit for a queen. Malcolm watched from the patio, a rare moment of contentment softening his usually intense gaze. "She's amazing with them." Malcolm's voice broke the silence as Detective Carla Monroe joined him on the patio. She had stopped by to deliver the final update on Michael Whitaker's case, but she couldn't help lingering to soak in the joy radiating from the family. "She is," Carla agreed, her tone warm. "You're lucky to have found her." "I know," Malcolm said simply, his words carrying a depth that Carla didn't miss. As the day unfolded, Malcolm and Elena found themselves alone in the garden while the twins napped. The golden afternoon sun bathed everything in a soft glow, making the moment feel almost surreal. "I've been thinking about what's next," Malcolm said, breaking the comfortable silence. Elena looked at him, curious. "What do you mean?" "For us," he clarified. "For the foundation, the girls, everything." Elena set down the watering can she'd been holding, giving him her full attention. "What are you thinking?" "I want to expand the foundation," Malcolm began, his voice steady. "Not just financial support, but mentorship programs, educational initiatives, something that really changes lives." Elena smiled. "That's a big goal." "Yeah," Malcolm admitted. "But I think we can do it, together." She hesitated, her smile fading slightly. "You keep saying together. What exactly does that mean?" Malcolm stepped closer, his expression sincere. "It means I want you to be part of this family, officially. Not just as the girl's nanny or someone who helps me keep my life in order. As a partner." Elena's breath caught, her heart pounding. She had dreamed of belonging, of finding a place where she was truly valued, not just for what she could do, but for who she was. And now, standing in this garden, Malcolm was offering her that and more. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling. "This isn't just about gratitude or—" "It's not," Malcolm interrupted gently. "This is about what's right, about what feels right. You've given so much to us, Elena. Let us give something back to you." Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled, nodding. "Okay," she whispered. "I'd like that." As the days turned into weeks, the foundation grew, its reach extending beyond Austin to communities across Texas. Malcolm and Elena worked side by side, their shared vision bringing them closer together. Ava and Iris thrived, their laughter a constant reminder of why the fight had been worth it. One evening, as the family sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the twilight, Ava climbed onto Malcolm's lap. "Daddy," she said thoughtfully, "are we going to be happy forever?" Malcolm glanced at Elena, his eyes filled with a quiet confidence. "I think we are," he said, "because we've learned how to be." Elena reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "And because we have each other," she added. As the first stars appeared in the sky, the Hayes family sat together, their hearts full of love and hope for the future. They knew there would be challenges, but they also knew they could face them. together. For the first time in a long time, tomorrow felt bright.